At exactly 2:14 hours on May 7, 2026, the fragile silence that had blanketed the Strait of Hormuz since the April 8th ceasefire was shattered in the span of 3 seconds. 3 United States Navy Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, the USS Mason, the USS Roosevelt, and the USS Cole, were executing a deliberate freedom of navigation transit through the world's most contested 21-mile chokepoint when the sky exploded in trajectories of flame. Radar operators aboard all 3 vessels simultaneously received the most feared alert in naval warfare: inbound, multiple, high-velocity. Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps naval forces had broken the ceasefire with overwhelming force, unleashing a synchronized barrage of anti-ship ballistic missiles, suicide drone swarms, and fast-attack speedboats in a calculated ambush designed to sink an American warship and shut the strait forever. What the IRGC could not have predicted was what had been waiting for them in the dark. The next 11 minutes would become the most decisive naval engagement of the 21st century, not because of the weapons fired, but because of the weapons that never needed to be. The trap revealed 0214-03. The IRGC's attack architecture was a masterpiece of layered lethality, and a textbook execution of what U.S. Naval War College strategists had internally war-gamed for years under the codename Serpent's Gate. The first wave consisted of 8 Shahed 238 jet-propelled kamikaze drones, staggered in 2 4-ship diamond formations and flying at wave-top altitude, specifically engineered to defeat the lower sensor threshold of shipboard radar by hugging the sea surface. At 30 feet above the waterline, traveling at 350 knots, each drone carried an 80-kilogram shape-charge warhead capable of punching through destroyer-grade hull plating. Simultaneously, from the rocky coastline of Iran's Qeshm Island, a position that U.S. satellite imagery had flagged 72 hours earlier, but that no strike had yet been authorized to neutralize. 4 mobile truck-mounted launchers elevated their tubes toward the night sky. Within seconds, 4 Nor anti-ship missiles, Iran's indigenously produced derivative of the Chinese C-802, screamed from their canisters at Mach 0.9, their terminal phase seekers already locked onto the electromagnetic signatures of the 3 destroyers. Each missile carried a 165-kilogram semi-armor piercing warhead. A single direct hit on a destroyer's superstructure would be catastrophic. Beneath the surface, acoustic sensors aboard the Mason detected a tertiary threat that no surface vessel ever wants to hear: the unmistakable transient acoustic signature of a torpedo tube hatch cycling open. An Iranian Kilo-class submarine, its diesel-electric propulsion system running so silently it had shadowed the American formation for over 6 hours, had moved into its firing solution. The submarine, identified as the Tariq, had positioned itself directly in the acoustic shadow cast by merchant traffic to avoid detection. It had 4 wire-guided heavyweight torpedoes loaded and ready. Threat matrix: 8 times drone inbound, 4 times anti-ship missile inbound, 1 time submarine in firing solution, 12 times fast attack craft approaching time to impact, 4 minutes 17 seconds. This was not a warning shot. This was a carefully orchestrated multi-domain kill package designed with one objective: put American sailors on the bottom of the Persian Gulf and close the Strait of Hormuz to U.S. power projection permanently. The IRGC commanders watching from their hardened command bunker beneath Bandar Abbas believed they had sprung the perfect trap. What they did not know, what they could not have known, was that the Americans had anticipated every single one of their moves. The Aegis responded 0214-06. Aboard the USS Mason, Commander Sarah Whitfield had been at battle stations for 6 hours. She had not come through the strait unprepared. She had come through the strait as bait and as the hammer. The moment her Aegis combat system spy 6 active electronically scanned array radar classified the inbound threats, Her ship's baseline 10 combat management software had already begun calculating engagement sequencing at a processing rate no human mind could match. 50 threat tracks per second, each assigned a kill probability, each sorted by time to impact. The Aegis system's automated response was instantaneous. From the Mark 41 vertical launch system cells running the length of the Mason's forward deck, 6 SM-2 block IIIC surface-to-air missiles erupted in a ripple-fire sequence separated by 1.2-second intervals. Their solid-fuel boosters ignited with a thunderclap that shook the entire ship. Each missile's dual-stage seeker, combining semi-active radar homing with an active terminal seeker, began tracking the incoming drone wave with the cold precision of a machine that feels nothing and misses nothing. At the same time, the Mason's 20 Phalanx CIWS, the close-in weapon system, the last line of defense, spun its radar dish and elevated its rotary barrel toward the horizon, spooling up to its 4,500 round per minute firing rate. The system designated 2 drones that had broken from the formation and were executing a crossing maneuver. In the space of 1.8 seconds, it fired a 2-second burst of depleted uranium rounds. Both drones detonated in orange fireballs 400 meters off the Mason's port bow. The fragments rained into the sea like metal hail. Flanking the Mason on the eastern side of the formation, the USS Roosevelt had simultaneously launched a 4-round SM-6 salvo, specifically targeted at the Nor anti-ship missiles. Leveraging the SM-6's unique terminal high-altitude capability in a sea skimmer intercept profile that had never been executed in actual combat before. The SM-6's active radar seeker acquired the Nor missiles at 12 nautical miles and ran them down at a combined closing speed of Mach 3.5. 3 intercepts were confirmed clean. 1 Nor missile detonated prematurely at 600 meters from the Roosevelt's hull, close enough that the shockwave blew out 2 bridge windows and sent 3 sailors to the deck with ruptured eardrums. It was the closest any American warship had come to being struck in the entire conflict. The submarine kill chain 0215-40. The submarine was the element the IRGC believed would be the decisive kill shot. It was the piece of the ambush that no surface commander could defeat. A torpedo fired at 3,000 yards in a constrained strait offers almost no time for evasion. The Tariq's commander, Captain Mohammad Reza Hassani, had waited with iron patience. He had his solution. He had his order. His thumb moved toward the firing trigger. He never pressed it. What Captain Hassani did not know, what no Iranian intelligence assessment had detected, was that a U.S. Navy Virginia-class nuclear attack submarine, the USS Vermont, had been running dark and silent in a counter-detection ambush position directly beneath the Tariq's keel for the previous 4 hours. The Virginia-class is the apex predator of the undersea domain. Its water-cooled reactor generates 0 acoustic signature during low-speed operation. Its anechoic tile coating absorbs sonar frequencies, and its BQQ-10 sonar suite can track a submerged dazzle-electric submarine by the sound of its crew breathing. The Vermont's commander had been watching the Tariq cycle through its attack preparation sequence on passive sonar with clinical detachment. At the precise moment that Iranian torpedo tube outer doors began to open, an acoustic event as distinctive as a gunshot in an otherwise silent room, the Vermont executed the underwater equivalent of pressing a gun to the back of an adversary's skull. Vermont transmits high-power active sonar ping range 180 meters, meaning you are targeted, stand down. The sound that flooded the Tariq's hull was physically painful to every sailor aboard. A direct contact active sonar blast at 180 meters is not a warning in the abstract sense. It is a demonstration of the mathematical certainty of death. Captain Hassani stood in his control room and stared at his sonar operator. The display showed the Virginia directly below him, already in a perfect firing solution with a Mark 48 ADCAP torpedo that could run at 60 knots and could not be outrun by anything in the IRGC's inventory. He had been swimming in a trap the entire time. The order to stand down came from his own survival instinct. The Tariq's outer torpedo tube doors cycled shut. Electronic warfare and counterattack, 0216-30. High above the engagement, invisible in the black stratosphere, two EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft from carrier Air Wing 5 had been orbiting since before the American destroyers entered the strait. The Growlers had been pre-tuned to the specific radar frequency bands used by Iran's shore-based College Far's anti-ship missile battery on Qeshm Island, the same battery that had just launched the 4 Nor missiles and was now cycling its targeting radar for a second salvo. At 0216-30, both Growlers activated their AN/ALQ-99 jamming pods simultaneously. The effect on the Iranian radar operators in their Qeshm Island fire control bunker was instantaneous and total, every screen filled with digital white noise. Their targeting radar, their data links, their encrypted communications to the IRGC Naval Command in Bandar Abbas, all of it became a wall of static. They were combat blind. At the same moment, a pair of AGM-88 EAARGM anti-radiation missiles dropped from the Growler weapons pylons and fell silently through the darkness. The missiles locked onto the Iranian radar's own emissions and rode that beam of energy straight back to its source. The Qeshm Island launcher site ceased to exist at 0217-02, replaced by a secondary explosion as its missile fuel reserves cooked off in a fireball visible from the decks of the American destroyers 18 miles away. Simultaneously, the USS Cole, the third destroyer in the formation, named in solemn honor of the 17 sailors killed in the 2000 IRGC-linked bombing, launched a quartet of Tomahawk Block V land attack cruise missiles programmed for the IRGC Naval Command facility on the outskirts of Bandar Abbas. Unlike earlier Tomahawk variants, the Block V carries a maritime strike capability and a new INS GPS imaging terminal seeker that can verify its target through photographic matching, even under electronic jamming. The missiles flew 180 nautical miles at 500 feet above the deck, threading between Iranian air defense radar coverage gaps that American SIGINT satellites had been mapping for 6 months. All 4 hit within 8 meters of their designated aim points. The IRGC Naval Command bunker, from which the entire ambush had been orchestrated, was reduced to rubble at 0223-14. Surface action, the fast attack boats 0218-00. The 12 IRGC Boghammer fast attack craft that had been screaming toward the American formation at 45 knots represented the final, most viscerally terrifying element of the ambush. Human pilots in small boats carrying RPGs, heavy machine guns, and suicide IED payloads. This was the doctrine of the swarm, the theory that enough small, fast vessels can overwhelm a destroyer's close-in defense systems through sheer volume and saturation. It was a doctrine developed specifically to exploit what IRGC planners believed was an American vulnerability in constrained littoral waters. What the fast attack boat commanders encountered instead was a wall of fire from an unexpected direction. 2 U.S. Navy MH-60R Seahawk helicopters, Shark 1 and Shark 2, had been running at low altitude north of the formation without active radar, silent hunters waiting for exactly this moment. As the Boghammer flotilla committed to its attack run at 0218-00, both helicopters popped up from the sea surface, activated their AN/APS-153 multimode radar, and engaged the lead boats with AGM-114R Hellfire II missiles. The first 2 Boghammers were obliterated in milliseconds. The third and fourth detonated when their own weapons cooked off in the secondary explosions. The remaining 8 craft immediately aborted, turning hard and accelerating back toward Iranian territorial waters at maximum speed. They did not make it cleanly. The Mason's forward Mark 45 5-inch naval gun, slave to the Aegis fire control radar, tracked the fleeing boats with robotic precision, firing its 70-pound guided projectiles at a rate of 20 rounds per minute. In a display of firepower calibration that underscored the extraordinary discipline of the American crew, the gun targeted the boat's engine compartments rather than their crew spaces, disabling rather than annihilating. Of the 8 retreating fast attack craft, 5 were disabled and left drifting. 3 escaped. Every Iranian crewman who chose to survive was recovered by their own patrol boats within the hour. Not a single American sailor fired a personal weapon. Not a single American sustained a life-threatening injury. The engagement had lasted 9 minutes and 47 seconds from first contact to last shot. Aftermath: the price of brinkmanship, 24 hours. When the last echo of gunfire died over the Strait of Hormuz on the morning of May 7, 2026, the strategic calculus of the Middle East had shifted with the finality of a tectonic event. U.S. Central Command issued a statement confirming that 3 American destroyers had successfully transited the strait after defending against an Iranian attack, and that U.S. forces had targeted Iranian military facilities responsible for attacking U.S. forces. The language was deliberately measured. The reality was surgical devastation. Iran's IRGC Naval Command acknowledged losses in a communique that described the engagement as an act of American aggression in sovereign waters, while conspicuously omitting any reference to who had fired first, what weapons had been used, or how many assets had been lost. The Qeshm Island Battery, one of 14 such facilities Iran had constructed along the strait's northern coast, had been eliminated. The IRGC's most capable Kilo-class submarine, the Tariq, returned to port with its crew alive and its commander aware that he owed that fact to a decision that would haunt his professional career. Of the 12 fast attack boats, 5 were recovered as floating wreckage. President Trump, posting at 7:30 hours from Washington, described the American crews as having blown Iran away, and warned Tehran that one big glow awaited further provocation. But behind closed doors, the National Security Council was wrestling with a far more uncomfortable reality. The ceasefire was not holding. The strait remained a contested artery on which 25% of the world's seaborne oil trade depended. And Iran, weakened, humiliated, but still undefeated in its core nuclear ambitions, had shown it retained the will, if no longer the means, to escalate. The global fuel crisis triggered by the strait's disruption since February was driving oil above $140 a barrel, threatening recession across Asia-Pacific, and pushing an estimated 8.8 million people toward poverty. The destroyers had won the battle. The war in every dimension that truly mattered remained unresolved. Closing the warning. What happened in the Strait of Hormuz on May 7, 2026, is not a story about American military supremacy, though that supremacy was on display in every single engagement. It is a story about the terrifying fragility of the global order when a state decides that the rules no longer apply to it. The IRGC launched a multi-domain ambush against the most powerful navy in history and failed completely. They failed because of superior technology, superior training, and a level of pre-battle intelligence preparation that demonstrated years of meticulous, patient collection. The Americans knew where every drone would come from. They knew where the submarine was waiting. They had mapped the radar frequencies. They had designated the targets. The ambush was a box built around the ambushers. But here is what you need to sit with. Iran still controls the strait's northern coast. Iran still has missiles in hardened tunnels that have not been struck. Iran's nuclear program, the original reason this entire war began, remains intact to a degree that no American or Israeli official will confirm publicly. the USS Mason transited the strait and fired tomahawks into Bandar Abbas. It will need to transit again. And the IRGC, an institution that has survived 40 years of sanctions, proxy wars, and targeted assassinations by absorbing punishment and adapting, is already planning the next engagement. The question is not whether America can win a tactical battle in the Strait of Hormuz. May 7th proved beyond any doubt that it can. The question, the one that keeps CENTCOM planners awake at 300 hours, is whether tactical victory in a constrained literal environment, repeated indefinitely, constitutes strategic success, or whether it constitutes the definition of a trap. What would you do if you commanded those 3 destroyers and you knew every detail of what was waiting for you? The drones, the missiles, the submarine, the fast boats. Would you transit? Or would you make Iran's containment someone else's problem? Comment below. Because the answer to that question is the only thing separating the next escalation from the last one. Stay sharp, stay informed, and remember, the Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide and the entire global economy passes through it. The next time it closes, the lights will go out somewhere on Earth. The only question is where.